always draw these columns?
I don't know. Oh, I was supposed to go to court today, and I was like, man, I've been doing court like 3 times this week. I don't want to do it.
The Jeep trial?
No, the Silas, the cave,
okay.
the pit. I was like,
apparently they just came down with the verdict.
So what did he get?
He's guilty.
Guilty.
Well, he basically, he pulled some sort of a plea, which is called like the stipulation to appeal or something like that, which basically automatically says you're going to go straight to a jury appeal trial.
Right.
So instead of the bench trial.
That's cool. I kind of figured.
Yeah. Well, the thing is they had the evidence. They had a minimum amount of evidence that would prove it guilty on, I think, the manslaughter or whatever. So, they just sent out the email on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to get up this. I was like,
where was that?
Melbourne.
Okay.
But they wanted us to get there. They get him walking.
You're not going to see him outside. What you're going to get video-wise of him walking in is him coming in that side door in the courtroom and walk those 3 feet to the seat chair.
Yeah.
For those of you that were here this morning, welcome back. And for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to the PARCA 2026 Annual Forum and Governor Albert Brewer Legacy Lunch. I am Kim Lewis, and I'm the President of the Board of Directors for PARCA. If there are any other board members in the room, can you please stand at this time? Thank you. Next, I'd like to recognize our support and our sponsors for the annual forum. They support PARCA and they support sound policy. Those sponsors are Landscape Workshop, Project XYZ, Vulcan Material, Vital, Bake Independent, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, and Charles and Kay Nayland. I'd like to also recognize my predecessor, JT Price. JT, can you join me up here, please? JT is the CEO of Landscape Workshop, headquartered here in Birmingham. JT has been connected to PARCA just about as long as he's been in Alabama. He was a member of the Roundtable. He was the Roundtable chair. He was a board member, chair of the Governance Committee, chair of the search committee that actually hired Ryan, and the past president of the board. Now he'll get a gavel and a little rest. And thank you for everything that you have done for PARCA. Gotta get the picture. JT, thank you for all your sound advice and everything that you have done for PARCA. Let's give JT another round of applause. If you were here with us this morning, you heard people across the state of Alabama that are on the ground, the personal and local and state policy as a response to this opioid challenge. These conversations offer us new insight, may challenge us, and give us opportunities and options to consider. This is the goal of the annual forum and the mission of PARCA. PARCA informs and improves decision-making in state and local leaders of Alabama through objective research and data analysis. PARCA's audience is policymakers and informed citizens. Informed citizens are those who choose to be informed and hopefully engage. And the definition of informed citizens are all of us that are in this room. PARCA pursues the mission with projects throughout Alabama that focus on the government structure, public education, public finance, and workforce development. These issues shape the state's history. We approach this to determine what our future will be. This is also critical issues that our founder and chairman, Governor Brewer, These are also critical issues that our founder and longtime chairman, Governor Brewer, had in mind. Governor Brewer did not expect he would be the governor in 1968. For the 33 months in the role, he instructed reform within the state, established the state's first portable motor pool. He centralized computer system. He developed the code of ethics. He established Alabama's Commission of Higher Education. He expanded the University of Alabama systems, which led to the creation of UAB and UAH. And he led the most ambitious education reform in our state's history. After returning to private life, Governor Brewer and other state leaders founded PARCA for more than 3 decades to counteract the rising information that was being put out that was misinformation. He recognized then and remained true to today that sound policy and advocate throughout the state only comes from factual information. And this is the work of PARCA. PARCA and all of Alabama and Alabama's own PARCA and Alabama owes much to Governor Brewer. And this lunch, we'd like to recognize his legacy and challenge each of us to do that as we move forward. We will hear from Governor Ivey later, but first I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Ryan Hankins. Ryan, please join us.
This morning, we heard some very powerful stories. We heard stories about death. We heard stories about families shattered. Stories of communities hollowed out. About a crisis that arrived quietly in medicine cabinets and emergency rooms and in rural counties that never saw it coming, and then announced itself loudly in statistics that were almost too grim to read. And yet, what we also heard this morning was somehow a story about hope. And that's a hard thing to hold, a hard tension to wrestle with. But I want us to wrestle with that for a minute, to think about that tension, because it's important. In the world of policy, good news almost always comes wrapped in something terrible. We don't celebrate fewer opioid deaths with confetti. We don't celebrate them the way we celebrate a touchdown. The honest response to progress on this crisis is complicated. It's pride and grief at the same time. We're proud of the lives that we saved. We grieve the lives that we lost. We want 0 overdose deaths. We want 0 harm, full stop. We're not there yet, but we're on the way. But we don't want that grief to interrupt us from recognizing and celebrating what we've built in Alabama, because what we have built matters. So what does it take to solve a crisis, a problem like this? This opioid crisis is what we would sometimes call a wicked problem. A wicked problem not in its moral nature, but in its complexity. It has no clean edges, no single cause, no obvious solution, no clear right answer. A problem where the solution that we implement today could very well cause tomorrow's problem. And a problem where choosing not to act is a choice with its own risks. Think about the layers of this situation. Think about what we heard this morning and the many layers of people involved. At the street level, you need someone with a Noxalone kit in hand, ready to respond in a crisis without fear and without judgment. At the neighborhood level, we need supportive housing and peer support networks and a community that does not stigmatize people who have made mistakes. At the state level, we need data systems. I loved hearing that word over and over and over. Data systems, prescription monitoring, treatment capacity, workforce training. At the federal level, we need funding. We need oversight of pharmaceuticals. And beyond our borders, we need international agreements to block the flow, to slow the flow of fentanyl and its analogs into our country. People at every level of policy working. There's no single switch to flip. There's no one department that owns this. There's also no one department that owns the solution. It sprawls across jurisdictions. It sprawls across agencies, across every level of government, from city councils to Congress. And yet, Alabama has made progress. Why, how? Back to that data word. First, as you heard from the commissioner, we shared data. That sounds very simple. We assure you it is not. Sharing data across state agencies means overcoming barriers, overcoming turf, overcoming systems that were designed not to share. They were built not to share. We have to re-engineer the system so that data can be shared with trust, without fear of recrimination. It also means agreeing on what those numbers mean, what we want to measure, what those measurements mean, how we define things, how we count success. And it means being honest when they tell us something that we don't want to hear. We began to count those opioid prescriptions in 2006. No one had any idea it was 116 per 100 people. We didn't like it. And in our state, our temptation is to look away. But in this instance, we did not. We embraced that reality and moved forward. We built systems that allowed agencies to share real-time information, to see where overdoses were clustering, where fentanyl was appearing, where treatment capacity was maxed out, and all of that without sacrificing privacy. We use data not to assign blame, but to allocate resources, to move faster, to save lives. That is not a small thing. That's a model that we can replicate. We also made room for the unexpected. The people you heard from on this stage are not all the usual suspects. Some of them came from lived experience, from accidents, from mistakes, from choices, and found themselves caught in addiction. People who could have easily been written off, but who made an effort to change and found the help to change and have begun to share and help others on that same journey. That's a personal victory that we can celebrate. And yet, in this context, recovery is not just personal. In our response, recovery became a workforce strategy. Those who were caught in addiction yesterday are helping people break free of addiction today. The people who understand this the most are those who have lived deepest with it, who have survived it, and who found room, who wanted to be in the room, and policymakers made room for them at the table. We got creative. We broke down silos between public health and law enforcement, between behavioral health and mental health and ERs, organizations that don't always speak the same language. They don't always see eye to eye. Sometimes they look at each other with distrust. We experimented with harm reduction strategies that were honestly politically risky and uncomfortable because we recognize that saving lives is more important than being comfortable. I'll say that again. We realized that saving lives was more important than just being comfortable. We did not wait for a perfect consensus before trying something new. That consensus would never come. We had to act. None of this happened by accident. It happened because people in this room and people like you outside of this room, people who work for agencies represented in this room, decided to act boldly, to act across boundaries, to share credit, and to be accountable to outcomes rather than bureaucratic comfort. Now, this is not over. As you heard Jonathan say just a few minutes ago, we're celebrating where we've come, but we've got a long way to go. The drug market is nimble. They are far more innovative than we can be. You've heard xylazine mentioned and other drugs that can be added. Far more innovative, far quickly than the government can respond, without oversight, without procurement rules, without regulations. So we have to stay vigilant. We have to keep those data systems running, keep those peer support networks funded, keep the public health system strong, because the moment we declare victory, we have lost the war. But everyone who contributed to this, clinicians, researchers, coaches, data analysts, lawmakers, the governor, all of those who had a role in this should be proud. You deserve to feel proud. Not comfortable, but proud about what we have done. So I want to ask a question. What if we took that same model? What if we took that model of data collaboration, of looking beyond ideological boundaries, looking across networks and across sectors and asking hard questions? What other wicked problems might we address? Think about one, gun violence. We all recognize and we all struggle with. From one perspective, it is a crime problem that needs law enforcement and prosecution. From another, it's a public health issue with the same patterns of epidemiology and challenges that we talked about this morning. From another, it is a behavioral problem with communities underrepresented, struggling economic pressure, and access to lethal means, just like we heard about this morning. And the same cycle of trying to interrupt and stop pain as opioids. Does that sound familiar? The political landscape around gun violence is different than opioids, but it's still highly charged. Similar tensions, similar confusions, but people come to that and see it through a lens of ideology before they see humans. What if we could look beyond the ideology and find the evidence, find the data, look for solutions rather than performative conflict? But this is what the crisis of opioids have taught us. When you lead with data instead of ideology, when you build coalitions across party lines, across sectors that normally are divided, when you center on the humanity of the people most affected rather than the political comfort of those least affected, we can move the needle on very difficult, wicked problems. That's not me being naive, that's me looking at what we talked about this morning. We could ask these same questions about housing insecurity, about hunger, about chronic absenteeism, about the emptying out of rural Alabama, all these issues that we are challenged by and we often just skirt around on the edges. These are wicked problems. They require the same elements: shared data, cross-agency cooperation, community trust, tolerance for uncertainty and risk, and the political courage to do things even when they are uncomfortable. So PARCA exists in that space where evidence meets action. We're not here to tell you or policymakers what to think, and certainly not what to do. But we are here to tell you what the numbers say, and what works and what does not work. And to remind you that these numbers are not numbers, they are people. They are fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, brothers and sisters, our co-workers, our friends, our neighbors. Our response to the opioid crisis in Alabama is one of the most compelling demonstrations in our state's history of creative problem solving across long-term challenges. It shows what we're capable of when we decide to take an evidence-based, collaborative, human-centered approach to serious problems. It didn't always make national headlines. It didn't result in grand political gestures. But it was hard work of people who refused to say no and to refuse to accept complexity as an excuse for inaction. That is the Alabama that we should be proud of. That's the Alabama that PARCA is here to document and to promote and to tell that story and to hold up as a model for what comes next. The opioid crisis will not be our last wicked problem, but it's given us a template. It's given us proof that we can solve challenges if we're willing to do it. I hope we will remember that. Thank you.
My fellow board members and I are committed to the mission and work of PARCA, and you've seen that mission and work today. We are determined to get this through financial support. PARCA is a 501c3 nonprofit funded by individuals, foundations, corporations, and people like you in this room. Over the last few years, 394 corporations, foundations, and organizations from 76 different cities and 36 counties have invested in PARCA's work, and some of you are here today. Thank you. I invite you, your company, your organization to join us. Your investment enables PARCA to remain independent, to pursue work critical to the state's well-being, its families, and its business, and these communities. PARCA is committed to equipping and inspiring Alabama's leaders on every level. But we need you to make that happen. Our budget this year was $1.9 million. We're proud to say we secured most of that through earned revenue. However, we're looking to generate $750,000 through contributions. We're convinced that PARCA is one of the most philanthropist investments that you can make. Our state and local governments spend billions of dollars every year, helping them make decisions that are just 1% more effective can affect all of our lives. I invite you to support the goal of making a contribution today, and that contribution can be made. There should be a QR on the screen. But either way, you can do it online. And that way we can make sure that we can continue the mission of PARCA. Now I'd like to invite the Vice President of the PARCA Board, Mr. Charles Nellen, to the stage to introduce our governor. Charles.
These are always too high for me. Let's see. First, before I get started, a shout out to Ryan Hankins. We are blessed indeed to have him as our executive director of PARCA. Thank you, Ryan. Y'all bear with me. You're going to wonder where I'm headed with this introduction. Albert Einstein, probably regarded as one of the greatest geniuses in human history, was traveling from Princeton on a train. Conductor came down the aisle, punching tickets of every passenger. Einstein reached in his vest pocket. He couldn't find his ticket. So he reached in his pants. Wasn't there. He looked at his briefcase, but he couldn't find it. Then he looked in the seat beside him. He still couldn't find it. Conductor said, Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. We all know who you are. I'm sure you bought a ticket. Don't worry about it. Einstein nodded very appreciatively. The conductor continued down the aisle punching tickets, and when he was ready to move to the next car, he turned around and he saw the great physicist down on his hands and knees looking under his seat for his ticket. The conductor rushed back and said, Dr. Einstein, don't worry. Don't worry. I know who you are. You don't need a ticket. I'm sure you bought one. Einstein looked at him and he said, young man, I too know who I am. What I don't know is where I'm going. So what does that story, it's a true story, have to do with our speaker? Einstein was a genius, knew who he was. Einstein knew where he was going. I can unequivocally say that our speaker today is a genius. Maybe not a genius physicist, but a political genius, a leadership genius, an economic development genius, education genius, who at all times has known exactly who she is and exactly where she's going. Grew up on a farm in Camden where she was taught the value of hard work, living within one's means. Our speaker's a person of tremendous faith. One of the great Alabama values that her parents instilled, along with family, community, faith, family. A genius that knows who she is and what she stands for. And folks, our speaker's always known where she was going, known long before she ever took office what she wanted to accomplish, focusing on economic development, infrastructure, education, and ethics. In economic development, under her leadership, 100,000 jobs or more were created, and with that number of jobs, the lowest unemployment in the state's history, which then fosters a business climate, putting Alabama in the top 10, which attracts more industries. If I hit on all her major accomplishments while in office, there wouldn't be time for our speaker. Our speaker set the bar high, very high, establishing a new level of performance that future governors of Alabama will be held to. It is a privilege today for me to introduce our speaker, and I need to just kind of back up a little bit. In checking my computer files, I came across the only other time I've introduced her. It was in the summer of 2002 at the Business Council of Alabama's Governmental Affairs Conference in Point Clear. I was the incoming chairman of the BCA and was introducing our endorsed candidates. Our speaker was running for state treasurer. I must have really messed that up pretty bad because I've not been asked to introduce her again until now, 24 years later. Norman Schwarzkopf, y'all remember him, Stormin' Norman, when he said, when placed in command, take charge and always, always do the right thing. Our speaker's done that from the moment she ascended to the highest office in our state. She took charge, as she said, to right the ship of state and setting us on the right course. And just as important, she's always, always done the right thing. It is indeed a privilege and a high honor to introduce someone who I think is a genius, someone who not only knows who they are, but where they're going. I think this is her 10th time to speak at this event, the 54th governor of the state of Alabama, Governor Kay Ivey.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Charles, for that kind introduction. And always it's great to join y'all here in Birmingham for PARCA's annual forum. I know earlier today you heard from our Department of Mental Health Commissioner Kim Boswell on how we are working together in Alabama to combat opioid crisis. The opioid crisis is certainly not limited to our state alone. This is ultimately a national security issue being battled at all levels. The fight is far from over, but we are making progress in Alabama. From 24 to 25, Alabama saw a 30% decline in overdose deaths. Between the work of our Opioid Overdose and Addiction Council and our investments of both general fund dollars and opioid settlement funds, we are saving lives. I certainly commend PARCA for spotlighting this very real issue throughout your conversations today. My goal in all that we do is to make Alabama the best state in which to live, work, and raise a family. If we're successful in that mission, we must ensure that every child in Alabama is afforded a quality education. When I took office in 2017, Alabama's education system needed immediate attention. In fourth grade math then, we ranked dead last at 52nd. In fourth grade reading, we were 49th. As a former teacher, I know there was no greater opportunity than to improve our students' education. I introduced my first policy as governor, an education initiative, strong start, strong finish, and we got to work. We passed important legislation like the Literacy and Numeracy Acts to refocus our schools on the fundamentals. When COVID-19 closed schools all over the country and many were not returning to the classrooms, I made sure Alabama would get back to in-person learning, and quickly. In 2022, I told the people of Alabama I was running for a second full term because of our students. Then it was during my inaugural address in 2023 when I laid out the goal of having Alabama rank in the top 30 for reading and math. Y'all, there are a few who tried to talk me out of making that bold statement, but I knew our students were up to the task and that we had laid solid groundwork during the first term to achieve this goal. I later declared we would have no more failing elementary schools and unveiled our Turnaround Schools initiative. In fact, I was proud to welcome students from Booker T. Washington K-8 school, located not too far from where we are today, to join me for my final State of the State address. Washington K-8 is currently part of my Turnaround Schools program. Their school had been systemically underperforming. When I took office in 2017, they actually had an F on their report card. Y'all, today they have a B as in boy, and the kids tell us they believe their schools can achieve an A. Their reading and math scores have greatly improved, attendance is strong, and these students have goals. They believe in themselves and are proud of what they are achieving. From an engineer to a pastry chef, to a nail salon owner, to a doctor, these kids see a future for themselves, and they understand being a good student is how they will get there. Washington K-8 is not just a great example of our Turnaround Schools initiative. These kids represent the Alabama education success story. Today, thanks to these students and teachers, Alabama is 32nd in math and 34th in reading and climbing. The nation's most recent report card The nation's most recent report card also reflected that Alabama is now first in the nation in math recovery and third in reading. And that's not all. We've also tackled the chronic problem of student absenteeism head on. Channeling the help of our teachers and school administrations, we have dramatically reduced truancy, and today, Alabama leads the country. Let me say that again. Alabama is #1 in classroom participation in the nation. And our efforts to improve education continue. Last year, we passed the Focus Act to remove the distraction of cell phones during instructional time. And just this week, I signed into law the Healthy Early Development and Screen Time Act. This will limit screen time for our littlest Alabamians in certain early childhood education and licensed child care facilities. I believe the best is yet to come for our students and for Alabama. Folks, the bottom line is Alabamians can achieve anything if they put their minds to it. I'm proud of our students, our teachers, and parents for stepping up. Y'all, I'm proud of Alabama. I am proud of our citizens, and I am proud to continue leading the state forward. And I am humbled to be the governor of all the people. The people of Alabama deserve our very best. Future generations of Alabamians deserve our hardest work today. This is our opportunity. So let's not waste a moment. Thank you, and may God continue to bless each of you and the great state of Alabama.
Governor Ivey, thank you for everything that you do to support our state and everything that you do for PARCA. Again, join me in thanking Governor Ivey for joining us today. And I also want to thank each of you for joining us today. You've heard what PARCA has been working on. You understand the issues that we're facing, and we want to ask you to continue the hard work that it's going to take to make the changes that we're going to need to continue for our state to thrive and grow. So thank you again for joining us. Use this time to network with everybody in the room, and we are officially adjourned. Thank you.